Hi dear students, in today's class we will see chapter 16, the victory, and the author of this chapter it is Manorama Jaffa, and this chapter says to us what is true victory, and the main character discussed in this story it is Alexander the Great. I hope that all of you know about the Alexander the Great. He is considered as one of the most successful commanders in history, and this story it speaks about an incident that happens in the life of Alexander the Great and which made him to understand what is the true victory in our life. So we will discuss the chapter 16, the victory, page number 111. Alexander the Great had won many battles. His desire was to conquer the world. So he was a great commander, and his wish and he desired to conquer the entire world. What is the meaning of conquer? Conquer means to take control of a country or a person by using force. So he wanted to make control or take control over the other countries, and he wants to take control over the entire world. So with that aim, Alexander the Great, he said to his generals, proceed to the Golden Bird. He ordered his brave generals. What was the aim in Alexander the Great? His aim was to conquer the world. So he ordered his general to move to the Golden Bird. And which was the Golden Bird in that time? India was known as the Golden Bird in the world at that time. India was a very rich country in that time. That is why Alexander the Great told, in order to conquer the world, he said to his generals, first move to the or proceed to the Golden Bird or India. With Alexander's command, the generals constructed the map and the army turned towards India. It crossed the mighty Himalayas through the long terrain in the cold, entered the country and reached the river Sindhu. So the commander, Alexander the Great, he gave the command to the generals. So after that, the generals obeyed the command of Alexander and they went through the maps, and then after studying the route map to India, they crossed the mighty Himalayas through the long terrain. Terrain means the large tract of land. They crossed the long distance in cold, entered the country and reached the river Sindhu. So the generals and the Alexander the Great, they reached India. There was a battle between Alexander's army and the army of King Puru of India. King Puru was defeated and made captive. With the first victory in India, Alexander was very happy. Alexander and his generals and his army reached India, and they had a battle with India's king. And who was the king that time? King Puru, and he was defeated. King Puru was defeated and made him captive. The army of Alexander, they made King Puru captive. And what is the meaning of captive? Captive means prisoner. They made King Puru as a prisoner, and it was a first victory for Alexander the Great in India. So Alexander the Great was very happy. And after the day's battle, when Alexander's army was resting, he mounted his horse Bucephalus and quietly slipped out of the tent to see more of the Indian countryside. So the battle was over. Then the Alexander's army, they were taking rest. Then Alexander the Great, what did he do? He just mounted on his horse. What is the meaning of mounted? Mounted means climbed or ascend. So he just climbed on his horse. And what is the name of his horse? Bucephalus. Then he quietly slipped out of the tent in order to see the Indian countryside, the Indian villages. Alexander moved on the streets and drove his horse on and on. So he just went on the streets and the countrysides of India. Then he noticed that the houses remained dark without lights. The women were wailing, children were crying. Alexander felt no pity. Instead, he felt proud of his victory. He when he went through the streets and the countryside, then he noticed that the houses were dark and the women were wailing, they were crying loudly, and the children, they were also weeping and crying. What may be the reason behind that? The women, they might have lost their husbands and the beloved ones, and the children, they might have lost their parents in the battle. So that is the reason why women and the children, they were crying. But Alexander did not feel any kind of sympathy or pity. But instead of that, he was very proud about his victory over India. Then soon he turned his horse on the other side towards the jungle. He was going through the countryside and the streets. Then he just turned his horse towards the jungle. As he moved further, he noticed a bonfire at a distance. He went closer and found some Indian saints performing yajnas on the bank of Sindhu. He stood quietly behind the thick trunk of a tree. So he visited the villages or the countryside. Then he just turned towards the jungle, and what he noticed there, when he went further, he noticed that there is a bonfire. Bonfire means large open fire. So he noticed there is a large open fire, and then he went closer to see what is happening there. Then he noticed some Indian saints or the sannyasis, they were performing some yajnas or religious ritual. And he wanted to see what is happening there. So he just stood behind the thick trunk of a tree. He wanted to see what is happening there. So he just stood behind a tree. I hope that you understood what all are the things that we discussed today. So today we discussed that Alexander the Great, he was a great commander in the history, and he wanted to conquer the world. With that aim, he sent his generals to move towards India. Then the generals, the brave generals, they went through the maps and they studied the route map to India. Then they came to India. Alexander the Great generals and the army, they came to India, and there was a battle between King Puru and Alexander's army. Then King Puru, he was defeated and he became the prisoner of Alexander's army. And after the battle, what Alexander did, he just went to see the countryside. Then he noticed that the women and children were crying because they might have lost their husbands or the parents in the battle. But Alexander did not feel any kind of sympathy over them. Then he turned towards the jungle, and he went to the jungle, and there he found that there is a bonfire, and some of the sannyasis or the Indian saints, they were performing some kind of yajnas or religious rituals. And then he wanted to see what is happening there. So he just stood behind a tree. So that is enough for today. In the next class, we will discuss the rest of the story. Thank you. Have a nice day.